Today's headline is Mr. Bartholomew's Baby Bear. It says, Max Adler writes for the Philadelphia Bulletin. A year or two ago, Mr. Bartholomew of Lancaster was out in Colorado for a few months, and just before he started for the journey home, he wrote to his wife concerning the probable time of his arrival. As a postscript to the letter, he added the following message to his son, a boy about 8 years old. Tell Charlie I am going to bring with me a dear little baby bear that I bought from an Indian. Of course that information pleased Charlie, and he directed most of his thoughts and his conversation to the subject of the bear during the next 2 weeks, wishing anxiously for his father to come with the little pet. On the night which had been fixed by Bartholomew for his arrival, he did not come, and the family were very much disappointed. Charlie particularly was cut up, because he couldn't get the bear. On the next evening, while Mrs. Bartholomew and the children were sitting in the front room, with the door open into the hall, they heard somebody running through the front yard. Then the front door was suddenly burst open, and a man dashed into the hall and upstairs at a frightful speed. Mrs. Bartholomew was just about to go up after him to ascertain who it was, when a large, dark animal of some kind darted in through the door, and with an awful growl went bowling upstairs after the man. It suddenly flashed upon the mind of Mrs. Bartholomew that the man was her husband, and that was the little baby bear. Just then the voice of Bartholomew was heard calling from the top landing. Maria, for gracious sake, get out of the house as quick as you can, and shut all the doors and window shutters. Then Mrs. Bartholomew sent the boys into Partridge's, the next door, and she closed the shutters, locked all the doors, and went into the yard to await further developments. When she got outside, she saw Bartholomew on the roof, kneeling on the trap door, which he kept down with the most tremendous exertions. Then he screamed for somebody to come up and help him, and Mr. Partridge got a ladder and a hatchet and some nails, and ascended. Then they nailed down the trap door, and Bartholomew and Partridge came down the ladder together. After he had greeted his family, Mrs. Bartholomew asked him what was the matter, and he said, Why, you know that little baby bear had said I'd bring Charlie? Well, I had him in a box until I got off the train up here at the depot, and then I thought I'd take him out and lead him around home by the chain. But the first thing he did was to fly at my leg, and when I jumped back I ran, and he after me. He would have eaten me up in about a minute. That infernal Indian must have fooled me. He said it was a cub, only 2 months old, and it had no teeth. I believe it's a full-grown bear. It then became a very interesting question, how they should get that bear out of the house. Bartholomew thought they had better try to shoot him, and he asked a lot of the neighbors to come around and help with their shotguns. When they would hear the bear scratching on one of the windows, they would pour in a volley at him, but after riddling every shutter on the first floor, they could still hear the bear tearing around in there and growling. So Bartholomew and the others got into the cellar, and as the bear crossed the floor, they would fire up through it at about the spot where they thought he was. But the bombardment only seemed to exasperate the animal, and after each shot, they could hear him smashing something. Then Partridge said maybe a couple of good dogs might whip him, and he borrowed a bulldog and a setter from Barney Magan and pushed them through the front door. They listened, and for half an hour they could hear a most terrific contest raging. And Magan said he'd bet $1 million that bulldog would eat up any 2 bears in the Rocky Mountains. Then everything became still, and a few moments later they could hear the bear eating something and cracking bones with his teeth. And Bartholomew said that the Indian out in Colorado told him that the bear was particularly fond of dog meat and could relish a litter of pups almost any time. At last, Bartholomew thought he would try a strategy. He procured a huge iron hook with a sharp point to it, tied it to a rope, and put 3 or 4 pounds of fresh beef on the hook. Then he went up the ladder, opened the trap door in the roof, and dropped in the bait. In a few moments he got a bite, and all hands manned the rope and pulled, when out came Magan's bulldog, which had been hiding in the garret. Bartholomew was disgusted, but he put on fresh bait and threw in again, and in about an hour the bear took hold, and they hauled him out and knocked him on the head. Then they entered the house. In the hall the carpet was covered with particles of dead setter, and in the parlor the carpet and the windows had been shot to pieces, while the furniture was full of bullet holes. The bear had smashed the mirror, torn up 6 or 7 chairs, knocked over the lamp, and demolished all the crockery in the pantry. Bartholomew gritted his teeth as he surveyed the ruin, and Mrs. Bartholomew said she wished to patience that he had stayed in Colorado. However, they fixed things up as well as they could, and then Mrs. Bartholomew sent into Partridge's for Charlie and the youngest girl. When Charlie came, he rushed up to Bartholomew and said, "Oh, Pa, Where's my little baby bear?" Then Bartholomew gazed at him severely for a moment, looked around to see if Mrs. Bartholomew had left the room, and then gave Charlie the most terrific spanking that he ever received. The Bartholomew children have no pets at present, but a Poland rooster which has molted his tail. This story came from the great state of Missouri, being reported in the Iron County Register of March 30th, 1876. Thank you for joining us today. If you want to continue to uncover all of America's lost and forgotten history, then remember before you leave to hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and remember to like and comment below. And we will see you next time on Americana Archives.